bio there, just a couple of highlights from it, and then
Sure, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Right on, man.
Why is it a long one?
Oh yeah.
You're having a tongue-tied night tonight too, so it's probably best to.
Is that the bio from the book, or is it?
Well, it was actually from the website. Yeah, about the book,
yeah.
from the Cosmometry website.
From the .com one? Hopefully?
No.
Okay. .com is a nice short one.
Okay. You know what?
Short
That's so funny because I found that earlier, and now I went to the .net, and I'm like, this looks way more in depth than I remember.
Yeah. No,
That's
.com
funny.
is short and sweet.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
You could actually read that one if you want.
Okay. Yeah, that's I remember that one from when I was looking at it yesterday.
Okay, Marshall, email here. Why can't I reply? There we go. Okay, the link is should be in your inbox.
There it is. Right on. Okay. Cool.
Ready to rock. Good to go, Grambo?
Yeah, as soon as you hit the record there, live. All right, we're super excited tonight to have Marshall Lefferts with us. He's a board member of the Resonance Science Foundation, as well as co-designer, writer, and producer of the Resonance Academy, which launched in 2014. And he's adjunct. He serves as adjunct faculty there as well. And he's an associate producer from the documentary film Thrive, which you all know about. And I've had the pleasure to be reading his book, Cosmomometry, exploring the HoloFractal nature of the cosmos. And it's a unified model of cosmic geometry, physics, music, and consciousness. It's pretty mind-blowing, very deep, and can't wait to talk to him about it. Welcome to the show. Thanks, Marshall.
Thanks, guys. I'm really happy to be here with you tonight, and I'm looking forward to a good, stimulating conversation together about
Oh,
all
yeah.
this.
Is that an arc crystal on your neck, I see?
Yeah, that's an art crystal. That's right.
You know, this is the 4th art crystal I've seen up close.
In the
No
last,
kidding,
in the
yeah.
last
In the
month.
last month.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never
In
seen
the
an art
last
crystal in my life, and in the last month I've seen 4.
Oh, cool. Nice. Yeah. Well, you know, that comes out, pops out, and this is designed by Nissim Haramain the crystal is molecularly grown in laboratory to be in the same geometric symmetry as the underlying field of space. And so it's tapping into that coherent field and making a coherent field around us and structures the water in our body and does amazing stuff. So, yeah.
You have to be ready for it to wear it?
Yeah, we're all ready.
Are you?
We're ready.
Are we? Okay.
Is there a way to, is there any way to, I don't know what the word is, not cheat or what, is there any way to, because I think those things are kind of hard to come by, right? And expensive. Is there any sort of way to do it DIY it? Or?
I actually don't know the particulars, but I think they might have a way to like pay it over in some installments. It's $1,200, you know, comes with the pendant and
Yeah.
everything.
Oh, that's not bad. $1,200. I heard
Yeah,
12
well,
grand.
Oh, you were
I
thinking
thought it was
12
12 grand. I was like, Jesus, I'll never. You know, we could probably work a couple art crystals into the budget next year.
Oh,
I mean, it should
definitely.
help the show, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's very good. They've done some testing on it recently where they actually found that it's emitting photons on the vertices of this little
Wow.
crystal. It's actually putting out photons. So that was a major breakthrough in their analysis of what's happening with it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm.
So, I mean, this book is really deep. Like I was mentioning before we started recording there, I mean, I absolutely love it because it's kind of got a bit of the stuff that we talk about on the show. Like we've talked about Nassim's work before, quite a bit, and we've talked about sacred geometry quite a bit, and music healing. And your book is kind of incorporating all this stuff together in a unified theory. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many places we could go with this because I'm interested in it all, especially the sacred geometry.
You've been
and
listening to the
music.
book by selecting it in segments on your phone and playing it back and having your phone read it to you, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken, right?
That's right.
So that sounds
Oh,
like
that's
a whole,
great.
yeah.
So
So I
Yeah.
suppose if it's between that or reading it on the screen, I mean, it's like 6 of one and half a dozen of another.
yeah, it was beneficial. Anyways,
It's a big book. I think I would rather listen to it.
Well, I mean,
did.
but I want to get it like it's. I mean, that was just for before the show because we didn't have a lot of notice before you came on, and you made you told us read a couple chapters, take a overview, read chapter 8, read this and that. So I focused on those and then went into some of the sacred geometry part. But I think we should start with just cosmometry, like defining that, and then we can go. And I got a bunch of questions and we can go into it from there.
Is
Yeah,
that
for
because
sure.
of stuff your mom did?
Or maybe we should.
Cosmic.
Maybe I should learn how to pronounce it first because I got
You did. No, you
messed
got
up.
it. Cosmometry, as far as I know. The cosmic mom for sure. It's actually a word. I thought I made it up like about 10 years ago. I was like thinking about sacred geometry, but I think my kind of tradition in this field began in the late 70s, and I came upon the work of Buckminster Fuller.
Yeah.
And Bucky was a very pragmatic, geometer and researcher and scientist and inventor and designer. So I was really kind of seated there before I learned about sacred geometry. And then I had my own kind of inner vision experiences and other kinds of experiences where I was getting a sense of the fundamental patterns and energy dynamics that were happening out there in the cosmos and here on the planet. And but at a certain point, especially after I met Nassim, which is around 20 years ago now, and understanding the scientific aspect of all this, I just had a feeling like, well, scientists aren't going to call what they do sacred geometry. It's just not going to happen, So there has to be some other word. And I was thinking, well, geometry is about Earth, geo. And so it's cosmic geometry. And then I thought, well, cosmometry. And I thought, well, that's kind of funny sounding, with mom in the middle of it, And so I did a web search on it. It's like 2005 or something. And out of like thousands of entries, which were all the dictionary definitions and just weird gibberish pages with words on it, there were 2 that were cited in scientific papers and 6 that came from Syrian masters, channel writings from masters from the Syrian star system.
No way.
Yeah. I was like, well, that's quite interesting. And, when I looked into that, they were saying, cosmometry is one of the most important things for humanity to come to understand. I was like, whoa, okay. So anyway, I looked into it further, and in fact, it's a word that's been in the language for like 300 years or so, but it's never been put in use, really, in a popular way. And so I just felt it was the appropriate term for this larger kind of field of study that includes Buckminster Fuller's work and David Bohm's insights and Nassim and Foster, who I work with, my own, and many, many other people.
And the spiritual masters too. I mean, it really connects with that part of it.
Yeah. And I so the traditional definition is the art of measuring the world or universe. It's cool. It's simple, but it doesn't really say that much. And so I define it as the study of the fundamental patterns, structures, processes, systems, and principles that underlie the manifest universe, that we're discerning them. And there's a lot of people have been doing this for centuries, really, but we're increasingly understanding it, especially, through the physics, unified physics now. But as the geometry and the physics and music as one unified system. So for me, cosmometry is the word I like to name this field so that it can be, more readily embraced in the academic and the scientific world. So
nice.
That's what it means to me.
And then, so how would this, just summarizing the book, and how would this differ from our mainstream paradigm. I mean, I know there isn't a unified field paradigm necessarily, but
yeah, not in mainstream.
yeah,
There's been numerous attempts at that.
yeah,
So it differs, well, from the mainstream scientific perspective, or from the scientific perspective, it's really solidly based on Nassim Harameyn's unified physics model. Because when I met, well, I said, as I mentioned, 40 years ago, I came upon Buckminster Fuller's work, and I studied his synergetics, which is his what he called nature's coordinate system. It's his analysis of the geometry of the cosmos. Amazing, deep, hard to read, hard to understand. I think I understand maybe 5% of it. Yet the core essence of it is really simple and profound. And when I first saw Nassim present, he was basing his physics on that core essence, the vector equilibrium, as it's called. And it's really the geometry of the 0-point field. And he was also basing it on the fundamental flow process dynamic called the torus, which is occurring everywhere throughout the cosmos. And you can see it in the weather patterns on Earth, and the solar dynamics and galactic dynamics. And
isn't it in oranges and stuff too?
Is what?
Is like the shape of oranges or because of that same sort
Absolutely.
of, yeah.
Oranges, apples, trees, plants, even us, we are toroidal. We've got a hole going in and a hole going out. That makes us a torus. And so when I saw Nassim present, I was like, whoa, I didn't understand physics very well. Like the mainstream physics has just been so abstract for me. My mind doesn't grasp it very well. But Nassim's was like so clear, and it aligns so clearly with those two fundamental models. I said, I think this guy's right. So I, got involved and have been involved with the Resonant Science Foundation for 15 years now, and supporting what I can to help him advance what he's doing. And his latest work, in the past few years, the papers he and Mirabelle Baker and William Brown and the rest of the research team are now putting out are solving the major problems in physics, because it's based on a model that includes the fact that space is not empty, space is actually full, and there's a quantized, granular, as it calls it, pixelated field at the tiniest scale, the Planck scale. And when you take that as the foundation of all the dynamics in the universe and apply it to what is a proton, what is an atom, and the electrons, what are the masses at all scales in the universe, they're just nailing the values of deriving all these things, mass and gravity and light and everything. They're nailing it precisely using this holographic mass solution, as he calls it. And so it's fundamentally different from that theoretical standpoint, and that's the theoretical model that I use in cosmometry to tie together with the synergetics geometry and then the music, because they're actually all the same system fundamentally. So it's really different in those ways, but the same in the real kind of classical sense, because it's still talking about the same dynamics that are referred to in physics, but they don't understand and they don't know the source of things like gravity and mass. Because
or dark matter as well. I mean, is that just
dark matter and dark energy? Yeah. And the Sims model answers all those questions and does so with incredible accuracy. Yeah.
And when Nassim gets those shapes out of the Planck scale, like how does he actually? How do you see those shapes? What is it? What does he call it again? A tetrahedra.
Tetrahedron?
No.
Tetrahedral?
Yeah. It's so I think you're referring to the kind of the very foundational geometry.
Yeah.
At the Planck scale is based on what Bucky Fuller called the vector equilibrium, and it's the geometry where all of the edges, the vectors on the outside, and all the ones going to the center point are of equal length.
Okay.
It's the only geometry that's like that, and that's why Bucky Fuller named it the vector equilibrium.
Right.
And it's the balanced state of the explosive radiant force and the gravitational constraining force. And when they're in pure, perfect balance, they zero out, and therefore it's the geometry of the 0-point field.
Ah, okay,
And then
that's a good way to
when you
explain it.
extend that out in all directions, it creates this tetrahedral. It's actually tetrahedral and octahedral geometry that is in perfect equilibrium balance. And Nassim actually, in his 64 tetrahedron model, you guys are probably familiar with.
Yeah.
It's basically like take that basic geometry and polarize it, which I won't try to describe because it's hard to just put words to some things that are better visually explained. But when you polarize it and you get to 64 tetrahedron matrix, that's like the first fractal instance of mass, because the pure field without the polarization is the 0-point field. It's when there's nothing, there's no size and rotation or any fluctuating dynamics that create the universe. And that's a tetrahedral matrix.
So that'd be like putting 64 of your art crystals together?
Yeah, exactly. And they do that. They actually, because they're all magnetically, the edges of the crystal, this is held in here magnetically.
Yeah.
And so you could take 64 of them and you make groups of 8, and then you take those 8 eighths and you put them together, and now they have a little cage that they can hold them all together so that they don't all fall apart. We were actually in Egypt a couple of years ago. I don't know if you guys know about the delegate gathering we did in Egypt 2 years ago.
Yep.
We've heard a little, yeah.
Yeah, and it was incredible. We had time in the 3 pyramids, all 3 pyramids, an overnight full moon access just for our group of 170, 180 people. And we had the 64 tetrahedron crystals, art crystals, but we didn't have a cage to hold them together. And so in between going to different pyramids, they'd all fall apart, and we'd have to go in and assemble them like in the king's chamber. And it was really awesome. And it was such a great ritual. But yeah, it's exactly right. And it's mirroring the fundamental geometry of space. It's symmetrically coordinated with that geometry, and that field is what everything's coming out of. And so when we have something at our scale here, our fractal scale, like this crystal, like I said, it creates a coherent relationship with the field, and it allows for the information flow to be coherent. Therefore, our biology can be more coherent, and you do feel it. And the answer to your question, no, you don't have to be ready. Yeah, you can wear one at any time, and you'll feel good.
Well, we have a little thing we have our tetrahedron on the table. It's a ceramic one.
Tell which one. I see lots of things there. Oh, it's just out of view. That's
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, nice. Good.
That's the start.
But that was very that was very good the way you explained that. It actually started to come together a little bit for me. Sometimes it's hard to comprehend that, how they measured that. Like one of the questions in here was to explain the vector equilibrium. I didn't realize that was the actual way they measured that that Planck scale. Yeah.
And and the Planck field is where you can imagine it's an electromagnetic, just like light. It's the same thing as light, but it's a frequency that's very high, a wavelength very, very tiny, and therefore it's high energy. And you can imagine that's when the electromagnetic fluctuations that create our universe come into this high tension state of equilibrium. And when they do, they hit the 0-point state, and it becomes a superfluid superconductor. So even though it's high tension, it wants to go back there, it's also completely malleable at the same time.
Wow.
And that's what he's showing, is like protons are spinning that same Planck little particles spinning together. It creates a proton spinning at nearly the speed of light. And then the electron cloud is the same field spinning, and gravitation is the same field spinning around planets. All of it is made of that one field. And his mathematics is just accurately showing that to be so.
And then the way music fits in it. I mean, because we were talking about this the other day with some friends, and how light at a certain frequency becomes sound, or sound at a certain frequency becomes light. So is that how all that's connected then, depending on whatever frequency it is?
Perfectly said. Yeah. There's only one frequency spectrum across whether it's light or sound. It's all. Now, the thing about light and sound, light is electromagnetism and sound is pressure. And so if you imagine that you have this universal field of light, of electromagnetism, way beyond our visible light spectrum, and then you have within that field these compression dynamics. We hear it as sound, but we are actually made of that. All of the form, all the physical compressed matter of electromagnetic substance is actually the same as sound. And so that's why I say it's the acoustic aspect of the universe. And that's why music is integral to this whole model. And there are other reasons I can touch into as well, but harmonically, from that harmonic perspective, that's why it's actually, completely oriented, because the frequencies of light and sound are all interacting in those ways.
So that vector equilibrium can be a fractal too. Do you find different things at different fractals of that?
Oh yeah. It's there's a chapter in my book where I highlight. There's one that is the electron spin in graphene, which is a hexagonal honeycomb pattern, and it just perfectly matches that vector equilibrium or isotropic vector field, the greater field, which is hexagonal. And then there's the snowflake, which is modeling that same hexagonal geometry. And then it goes all the way up to superclusters of galaxies, which there's some researchers from Italy that were curious to see if there was a pattern to the clustering of galaxies, superclusters. I mean, these are clusters of clusters, these massive scale. And they found that it is in this fractal octahedral geometry, very precisely organized, which they don't have a model for. They call it the egg carton universe, but it's exactly the geometry of the 0-point field, exactly. And so it is fractal. You're absolutely right. It's that basically that geometry is present at all scales because it's the 0-point geometry. And so it's the reference for all the other frequency fluctuations. And so it's at every scale.
I was just looking up that video of the Venus and the Earth, the dance they do over every 8 years if you drew a line between them, because I thought, for some reason, I thought that ended up being a hexagonal too, but it doesn't.
That's pentagonal.
That's right, like the thing on Saturn. That's a pentagon too.
Yeah.
Is it hexagonal or pentagonal?
I don't know. It's hexagonal. The one on Saturn is hexagonal, which is quite remarkable when you think that's a fluid dynamic atmosphere. And here's this geometry sitting at the top, very clearly defined. What the heck causes that?
I think it's sound of some sort, because it's like that when you put sound waves through sand and
cymatics.
shit.
There's a chapter in his book on that too. Yeah.
Oh, is there? Yeah. Sorry, I haven't looked at. I don't look at the books. No, I'm the straight guy.
It's you're absolutely right. And John Stewart Reed, who's a cymatics researcher, he put out a really good proposal hypothesis of exactly that there's because in order to have a cymatic pattern, you need to have a boundary where the sound is reflecting off of and coming back in through the medium of water or sand or anything like that, a defined area. And so he says there's a circular boundary, like a promenade of I've forgotten if it was like ice cliffs or something like that. And then the convection coming from the inner atmosphere up and through is creating pressure waves that are then bouncing off each other through this circular container, creating this cymatic pattern. And man, that makes total sense to me. And I think you're absolutely right.
I wonder if that's happening on Earth on some level as well. I mean, you wouldn't be able to see it. I guess it could be harder to see because it would be in the magnetic field maybe or something, right? Do you notice anything in relation with the magnetic field or the atmosphere?
I was going to say the atmosphere. Maybe that's a container too.
Yeah, and it is, and I would say the real obvious symmetries that you see in cymatics, which can be threefold or fourfold or fivefold, sixfold, 7, 8, in even higher numbers, of these geometries. Again, if you think about the manifestation of form in the universe and right here on the Earth as a result of pressure compression, which is the acoustic aspect of what we're talking about here. Then you look at things like crystals and flowers and plants. You see these clear symmetries in certain ones of them. And so what's the reason for that? You know, why did a flower just make a beautiful, perfect triangulated petal thing, or 5 of them, you know, or in perfect symmetry? Well, I think it's because the same dynamics are actually at play. You know, basically, we're seeing cymatics in a 3D form coming manifest from the universe. You know, and the boundaries are defined in other ways than a physical container, but they're there nonetheless.
Right.
Ooh, that's interesting.
One way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
That's kind of like looking at. I've always looked at 33 differently since I started considering it as more of a numerical representation of sacred geometry. So it's like if you had to write out the math behind
33?
Yeah, because it's like, it seems as, you know, I think it was when we were talking to Scott Onstott, but we were talking about how this 33 comes up everywhere. And it's like, it's in stuff that can't be related because of conspiracy or anything like that. It like transcends human intervention, like 33 vertebrae and all this stuff. And then it's like, and you see all these patterning in the universe, all this sacred geometry that's repeating itself in fractal. And it's like, well, then, you know, what's the math behind that? If you had to turn that all into code, what would all the numbers be? And he's like, 33 is one of those base numbers. It's one of the base units of the sacred geometry of the universe.
Right.
Or at least that's how I took it. I could be way off. I'm not quoting him.
Yeah. For me, you know, the kind of deeper layer of why this is so is because the energy dynamics of the cosmos are quantized, as they discovered, which, you know, Max Planck was the one who actually came up with that idea. And then there's the Planck constant, which defines the energy value of each of the frequency little packets. It's called the quantum of action. And that, you know, that kicked off the quantum revolution and understanding the quantum nature. But the point is that all the frequency dynamics of all scales are quantized. And so when you have a quantized system at all scales, then you get these ratio relationships, like 33. That's one of the ratio relationships. 311s, you could call it, or, you know, the different ways that this quantized system harmonically organizes itself. That's why you get the Fibonacci sequence and those numbers, and you get the octave ratios in music and all the harmonic ratios in music, because all these quantized whole number actions in the universe are literally informing our, you know, who we are, what we experience,
and they overlap.
Yeah,
like if I like all the music stuff can overlap with the other stuff, and it's just insane.
Exactly. Yeah, there's actually only one thing going on in the universe.
So it's got to be a simulation then, right?
I knew that was coming up. I was hoping we'd wait a little bit longer before Darren asks the simulation question.
27 minutes.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question for sure. And I don't know, always comes to my mind is, well, which is the simulation? The one, you know, we call it a simulation that we simulate the universe.
Yeah.
But is the universe a simulation of something else or from some other place?
How deep?
Maybe it
go?
is.
Yeah.
It's the imagination of ourselves.
The simulations we have are the way they are is because we're modeling it off of the universe. You know, the same fundamental attributes are there. So it's more like we're simulating the greater reality at a much more crude level, actually. You know, the resolution of what's happening in the universe is way beyond our technology so far.
Yeah, because when I was reading through your book and I saw the double phi ratio everywhere and the sacred geometry and the platonic solids and how everything fits together, of course, it made me think of Darren's little simulation idea
what's
here.
What's your kind of like when you have this idea about it being a simulation, what does that mean to you? Like when you see all these patterns, does it mean, do you think that means that there's some other
It's like a
intelligence we don't know
scaffolding.
about?
Yeah, it's like all that patterning is humans getting smart enough to the point that we can start to see the scaffolding of our own reality.
Or the code,
And
maybe?
in the code behind it in a lot of ways. So to me, that just instantly, well, it's what I go two ways with that: simulation or intelligent design. And I tend to go simulation because, I mean, or maybe not. I mean, there's probably a third outlet there, but it seems to be the further I go down either of those rabbit holes, those are the two places I seem to keep ending up. It's either like it's built on we can see this scaffolding and this patterning because it's some sort of a hard drive, or it's because it's that's how it's made, and it's just easier to make it like that because I can just take this and copy it over there, and I don't know. Or we're just the imagination of ourselves. Yeah. And I mean, by definition, simulation is intelligent design. So, son of a bitch.
There is a third way of looking at it, which is what actually Nassim's theory is saying. He has a great paper called The Unified Space Memory Network from Cosmogenesis to Consciousness, and it's describing the information aspect of the energy matter information relationship that I talk about in the book. And you know how from the Planck scale, it's like the Planck scale is the foundational ground state, and it's like a hard drive, you know, captures and stores information in little bits in a magnetic drive, and that's happening at the Planck scale. So the information is actually present throughout the entire universe, and then it comes up from the Planck scale into the atomic and into the biological and into the planetary and into the solar and then galactic and throughout. So it's one continuum of this exchange of information. And it's got a constant feedback loop. He calls it feedback feed forward because it's feeding back from our experience that we're having right now, feeding back into the field, which then feeds it forward to take that information of this now moment and then say, okay, that's where everything's at, and here's where it's going. So here you go. Here's where it's going. You know, so it feeds it forward. And there's this feedback loop process. And when you include that in the model, then you get the kinds of things you're talking about, which sound like intelligent design, for example. You know, that's a name that's been, you know, controversially applied to the idea, or simulation, which is another way of looking at it. But in this model, it's actually just an intrinsic process. As you could say, there is intelligence, and actually it is suggesting that there's what we call consciousness throughout the entire structure. Intelligence, awareness, reflexivity, these attributes of what we define as consciousness are actually happening at all scales with this feedback loop process. And so it's another way from a physics perspective of answering the same question.
Wow.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's it reminded me of the torus again, like on a
it is
just on a micro scale maybe, or it's just moving. It's happening so fast that's our reality. Like our time is, I don't know. I can't get too deep into that.
The torus is the dynamic that is fractally embedded across all those scales.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's passing information through this fractally embedded toroidal field, and the being a hologram, being holographic, the information of the entire universe is present in every point.
That's how we have access to it, through whatever they would say, the Akashic records or whatever. So as it comes back out into that field, because it's fractal, we can access whatever we want, really.
It exactly explains remote viewing, telepathy, you know, all the clairvoyance and clairaudience, all these things that we're like, how do you explain that in a physics model?
Yeah.
This explains it. There's actually a very practical model to explain how everything is universally entangled all the time. And when you include that in the model, it starts to make more sense.
Exactly, you know? Yeah.
Things that were like mystical, spiritual can be brought in, and it really starts to unify the spiritual and the scientific as one continuum.
Yeah. which is a great. I mean, that whole chapter in your book on that is really interesting. We can get into a little bit later.
So does that mean that everything has some level of consciousness, or that human consciousness is affecting everything?
Both.
Well, it's kind of a both and. I mean, of course, human consciousness is affecting everything because the whole thing's unified. Now, the effect we're having is a little more localized than that. We have so much, let's say, power or amplitude of our field of consciousness within the universal field. We're not the biggest show in the universe, though.
Maybe we are.
Yeah, but the thing is that we are entangled and affecting the whole thing. It is true, because that's the nature of the whole thing. And so that part is true. And yeah, the idea that there's consciousness throughout the whole of it is what the model is suggesting. Now, not necessarily human experience of consciousness. That's just one relative framework or point of reference. So you have to kind of let go of that being the model and just think about the attributes of consciousness being present throughout. And that's actually being more and more discovered to be true.
Mm-hmm. So does this reconcile the difference between the quantum physics? You know how the scientific realm seems to be broken down into, like, this is the hard table, like this is hard. There's the hard science of the physical model.
Always hitting the table.
And then the quantum thing, which they can't seem to reconcile. So does this do that in a way? Just makes it one theory instead of this as something changes the physical properties as it gets bigger kind of problem?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's absolutely right. That's why we call it unified physics.
Unified field theory, is that right?
Yeah, it's unified field theory. So is there a unified field? That's always been the question since Einstein and the others back then were trying to find that. But then, like you're saying, there's the quantum dynamics, and then the relativistic cosmological large scale. And they were so different, like gravity and the strong force. They're, so vastly different in their strength. How could they be the same field? And the unified physics model reconciles that in a very simple, elegant, and easy to understand way that is mathematically dead on accurate. Like Nassim's holographic mass solution for the proton shows that the so-called strong force that keeps protons together, and they call it the strong force because they didn't know what the heck it was.
It's stronger than the weak force.
Yeah, it's stronger than the weak force, which they don't know what that was either. And so he shows that it's the dynamics of the spin of this Planck field at near the speed of light, with a singularity at the center, what we call a black hole, but a singularity, the 0 point at the center, creating a mass and a dilation of the mass because of the spin. And he calculates that, and he gets pretty much accurately the strong force and the fall off of the strong force, like to such a high degree that it really appears to be the right model. And that's the same model that then defines gravity as well. And so therefore it unifies. It's actually just quantum gravity. It's the same field doing the same effect, but at a different strength.
That's how he said that the weight of a proton is the same as the mass of a proton is the same as the mass of a universe, because it's
the holographic mass inside of a proton, when you calculate the energy density and convert it to a mass value, is equal to all the protons outside of it that define the relative mass of the universe. Yeah. It's really quite profound, and it makes sense when you think about, well, there's an equilibrium between inside and outside. There's a balance.
Is there one of those things at the middle of the Earth?
Yeah, there is.
Is it causing the Earth to expand? Because is that creating mass? It's creating matter?
He's saying that there is matter creation happening from this, what are called black holes or whatever you want, singularities.
At the center of the Earth.
At the center of every body in the universe. And
how does the sun affect that?
Well,
is the sun because when we talked to Neil Adams about how the Earth is growing, pair
Or
production.
all planets.
All planets are growing.
Everything's growing.
The Earth is growing because of the same sort of thing you just showed me with your hands was causing pair production to happen at the center of the planet. And that's why the ocean shelves are some of the newest material we can find on Earth. The like rifts, the transoceanic rifts are some of the newest material as opposed to the oldest. And he thinks it happens in spurts because of something to do with the sun. But I remember that specifically, that little motion with the hands, and that just made me think of Neil Adams.
That's great. Yeah, well, if you think of the sun as the same, it's all the same field. This is where you got to just kind of think about there's only one thing going on, right? So they have this field that is coming into coherent states of form at different scales, and the sun is a very dynamic, energetic, radiant version of that. And the Earth is inside of that field, and all the other planets are getting influenced by this powerful energy source that is itself fluctuating and then impacts the Earth's magnetic field and the plasma and everything that comes in through poles. And it's going to be affecting it all the way through, not just on the surface, but because it's made of the same medium. You know, the atomic structures are all made of this same Planck field all the way through, then these dynamics will be able to go penetrate all the way through into the center and resonate and you know, go into resonance or out of resonance and create these kinds of fluctuations. And be kind of you could maybe think of it as kind of like a pump where it's sort of pumping the energies, and that could be what's causing this kind of a manifestation from the center of the Earth. I don't know. I'm making that stuff up right now because I don't really know about that particular geological stuff. But from a kind of a model standpoint, it does make some sense.
I like it.
Yeah, I mean, he showed some pictures of the moons, like some of the moons of Jupiter were really, I think there's a couple really good examples where if you shrink the moon down, it all those crevices and big gullies it fits into a nice little ball. It almost looks like it's been splitting apart over.
Yeah, exactly. Those lines of division, continents on the Earth, when you shrink it all back down and it just fits together perfectly.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's pretty obvious. You know? It's happening. Things are growing.
That's why the dinosaurs could be here before, because there's less gravity.
Oh yeah. I remember.
Right.
That's right.
Ain't that a motherfucker?
That was a cool concept, and it totally made sense. Like, less
I think
gravity.
that's Great American number 164. If anyone wants to go back and look into that, Neil Adams. It might not be 164. It might be 160. Yeah, that's crazy. So that means that gravity and entanglement are the two forces that don't seem to be affected by the speed of light.
Well,
and consciousness.
Yeah. So, yeah, the relationship between the electromagnetic activity, which is light, and so we have the speed of light, and then the underlying nature of the unified field, which is actually in a stillness. Like what we experience as space and time is just a relative experience of an underlying state that is in equilibrium and coherence. And when that state is tapped into, the ideas of time and space are no longer relevant. Those are relative to the experience. And so there's an instantaneous effect when those dynamics cross that 0 point field. And so again, there needs to be a model to explain how could there be this entanglement that radically transcends the speed of light when supposedly that couldn't happen in the universe. And so there's that underlying state that is entangled at all times.
Well, yeah, because especially if you think about it at the Big Bang, so I don't know. Does unified field theory, does that fit in with? Is there Big Bang in that?
Well,
because if you play that back to the Big Bang, then all particles are entangled.
Exactly. Exactly right, and that's beautifully said. And so the what is the Big Bang is the question, and that statement. The outcome of that is exactly a unified, entirely and always entangled system. And Nassim's proposal of what a Big Bang is that you have. We were talking about the proton mass being equivalent in the holographic mass inside of every proton to the universal mass of all the protons externally, the relative mass, 10 to the 55 grams per cubic centimeter inside and 10 to the 55 outside. And so then you have this universe in equilibrium. So the protons are held in the size that they are with this intense amount of energy density inside of them. Now imagine if one of those protons just happens to pop out of that universe. And now it's no longer being held by all that pressure of all the other protons. All of a sudden it's just going to go poof like that and want to expand and release all that energy.
And that's a new universe?
And that's a new universe coming into. It's like basically like a contained bubble that is going poof.
And that's probably happening like a billion times a second.
It could well be. It could well be.
So does that play into that or fit into that theory, the multi-universe theory, that every decision, every sort of thought, every action is a new reality kind of? Is that the multi-universe theory kind of thing? I don't know.
That's just crazy talk.
You were just creating big bangs out of protons. So.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's probably happening is the protons that can't leave or that are getting sucked into the black holes or the singularities are popping off.
Yeah. It could be that's what's happening, and there's a containment that keeps it from happening too rapidly, but it could be happening all the time, and we can't look out there yet.
Or maybe that's the stuff that's ending up at the center of the Earth,
circling back around and
like an ocean current sort of thing, like a giant galactic ocean current.
Yeah, and if you think of the matter, which are the protons, the atoms that are formed from those dynamics, as coming from this Planck field, then it's possible these are dynamics of spin that are kind of spinning up and flying off from, these black holes are spinning at the speed of light. They have a lot of shearing of the field, and they could spin off these little particles, so-called particles. And that's one way we can imagine the creation of matter, as we call it.
The idea of the proton is intriguing to me because I don't know. The idea of the proton having everything you need in there to start a new universe is interesting because it seems to me like the further we grow technologically, the more we find out we can, like they just cured cancer with some sort of light emitting thing in Mexico, right? So, I mean, I don't know. I think at some point it's all going to be different sort of light sequences that you can do. You can almost rewrite the DNA of the body with light. No, I think sounds or light specifically. Yeah, I think sound is like a rock is a hammer compared to where we're going to be with light in like a couple of 100 years if we don't blow ourselves up.
Yeah, and it's actually not even a couple 100 years. These things are actually here now. There are, like you just mentioned, one that can cure cancer, and it is actually both light and sound, and it depends on kind of what level of the medium of biology or physical form that we want to affect. Light is finer and it doesn't penetrate into the body as much, whereas sound will penetrate and go all the way through the body. And so there are some technologies that can use laser light to then stimulate an acoustical impulse into the body and basically convert the light frequency into an acoustical impulse that transmits much more deeply into the body to create these kinds of resonance frequency shifts in the biology. And once you restore resonance and wholeness to an organ or the cellular tissues or whatever, then these imbalances we call cancers or other diseases, they don't last in a resonant, coherent environment. So and it's not a couple hundred years away. These things are already they've been actually existed for quite a while. I think you guys probably know that. But the fact is that they're getting more refined and more effective and more accessible. And for example, there's some people I know who have a company called Sonify, which can take a 30-second recording of your voice and analyze the frequencies that are in your voice, and through that analyze your entire body system, not only just the state and health of organs and tissues, but things like minerals and vitamins imbalances or deficiencies or excesses or whatever, inflammation, and then ultimately treat that through the frequencies that are either needed or need to kind of cancel out those inflammations, but literally, through your phone. And it's, I anticipate, I don't know the time frame that's going to come out, but they're going to have an app and be able to do that diagnostic just right on your own phone with your voice for 30 seconds.
Wow, that's crazy.
Well, I mean,
the vibration, the sound vibrations of all those systems in your body are actually contained in your voice, coming through the vagus nerve and out and then through your voice. So it's all there. Jeez,
eh? And on the tail end of that, you can start to see where, because that's where that's free energy, that's replicating stuff. That's where you get to go to your thing and say, give me a fully cooked Thanksgiving turkey, and it's like blah, 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 boom, here you go, because all it needs to use is some fucking photons photons.
Exactly.
Protons
and photons,
both. Yeah, throw a little both in there, boom,
because it's
that's a whole universe. That's everything you could ever need in that one.
It's all a hologram, and the hologram is information in an interference pattern coming into the create form.
Man, Star Trek was so ahead of its time. Sometimes it's fucking insane. Like, it's almost like Gene Roddenberry knew some shit.
He did. He got a cosmic download.
Isn't Nassim working on some? Gene was hanging out with some spiritualists back then, doing some channeling and stuff. So,
was he?
Yeah, really interesting.
Is this where we're heading now, into channeling?
Well, we can't. Geez, it's ripe for channeling for sure. But what about Nassim's?
Well, because that'd be a Akashic record, right?
Well, yeah, maybe, or entities or whatever. I mean, who knows, right? If it's coming from the Akashic record or from another,
it's coming from the photon,
or whatever, right? It's coming through that, I guess. Mm-hmm. But what about before we leave the free energy topic? Like I heard Nassim talk a few years ago about he's working on that. Like, what? You're so good at explaining all this in a visual way that's understandable. Can you describe how they're trying to extract energy from the 0 point then?
Yeah.
Or how that would work?
Yeah. So, Nassim has a patent for a device that the simple name is just called the resonator, or the harmonic flux resonator, which you can read about on the resonantscience.org website. Somewhere in there. And so if you imagine that there's this Planck field that we're all in all the time, and it's a fundamental coherent field that is vibrating at a scale that's so far, even 20 orders of magnitude smaller than a proton, and just extremely beyond imagining how small. That's what everything, all the fluctuations of light and sound and form are in and made of that field. And, a proton, for example, there's no known half-life, no known decay time of a proton. The estimated decay of a proton is 4 times the age of the universe. So that means that everything we're made of is actually super abundant. And so where are they getting that energy from? Well, they're spinning within that field. And that spin is creating a torsion dynamic that is accessing energy from this underlying field. So now imagine taking that up to our scale and spinning a magnetic field at speeds approaching the speed of light in their rotation, and then at different frequencies and even different harmonic relationships, kind of musical relationships. Wow. And doing that in a double toroidal manner. That's what conceptually Nissim's
Wow.
model is based on. And that idea, ultimately, then it can start to draw energy from the field into our fractal scale. It's basically creating a fractal scale version of what a proton is doing, but bringing it up to our scale so that we can then convert that into useful energy.
Yeah. Wow,
that's the concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these arc crystals, and I mean, he has that resonator in his laboratory, and the arc crystals are, when each crystal is made before it gets shipped out, they have it in the room on some shelves, and it's being they run the resonator to create a coherent field, and then the atomic structure in the crystals becomes resonant with that coherent field and increases the coherence of the electromagnetic activity and organization of the crystals themselves, so that they're actually basically resonated from the resonator before they're actually put out into the world.
Wow.
It's pretty cool.
I need to get myself an arc crystal.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
how does
Maybe we
this,
could just get one for now. Just put it in between
yeah,
us.
sure. We can share it.
Just lean in.
Yeah, and then put your water bottle on it for an hour or something like that, and drink the water, because it structures the water, makes it coherent, and it makes your biology better. And,
Nice. Yeah. I can give it to Darren, then I'll cleanse it afterwards.
The fuck?
So what about how this translates to self-awareness? Like, you've got a whole chapter there on spiritual consciousness and the human experience.
mm-hmm.
And whether it's the feeling body or how intention and attention may work, and of course love and joy are in there too. Do you want to try and explain that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we were talking about earlier, if you think of the entire field as a feedback loop process,
Yeah,
and going on at all scales in this fractal toroidal process, from the Planck scale into the protons and into the atoms, and then into the DNA, these protein molecules, then into the cells and into the organs, and then the whole organism. That all is a feedback loop process at all these different scales of information flow, that by the time it gets up to our level of complexity and organization and coherence, the feedback loop becomes what we call self-awareness. It's actually a natural process in an evolving universe to do that. It's actually happening at all scales, but the amount of information and organization and complexity is different at different scales. And so it basically is kind of empowering this feedback loop of what we experience as self-awareness. And so then when you think about consciousness as being intrinsic to the whole field, you can think about our brain and heart and central nervous system and solar plexus as a fractal antenna within that field, not generating consciousness, but receiving and transmitting both in this field. And there's a sense of self boundary and identity, both biologically and in this field around us, this biofield that we identify with, and yet we're connected into the whole of it. And so then the same dynamics that are at play in the universe of what we call gravity and radiation are at play, because there's no difference from the physical field and the consciousness field. There's only one thing going on. Again, if you just keep saying that over and over again, you realize that it's actually one unified phenomenon that is interacting with itself. And so, the ideas of an intention and attention, and even love and joy, Bucky Fuller he always said love is metaphysical gravity. And so he's saying that's the experience we have of what the universe does, what we call gravity. The tension that connects everything together, and the attractive force that brings it closer. And then way back in, my
So
early years
this,
of considering this.
sorry,
That?
so does that mean like the metaphorically all the planets and suns and stars and moons of the solar system are uniformly experiencing love all of the time?
From a physics perspective, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Bucky was saying. Yeah. And that we humans, we call that same force dynamic love.
Bucky was a hippie.
He was. He was like one of the originals. He certainly inspired a bunch of hippies.
Oh yeah.
And then, the other balanced polar dynamic of that attractive gravitational is the radiational expansive. And so we could experience that as joy. And so that's why I say love and joy are the balanced, polar experience of these dynamics that are happening throughout the universe. Just as our intention, which is the inward tension, the gravitational tension, and then attention, which is like, showing up in the universe, attending and having this outward flow. It's either all equated to the same dynamics because it's both a field of energy, matter, and information or consciousness all unified together. So, it describes the same thing.
So what about putting some of that into practice? We had a guest on, he was an alchemist, and so I've got questions about the platonic solids, and he was using just consciousness and a dodecahedron. So he was focusing on this plant, and he did it every day for, I can't remember how long. It wasn't very long. Like it was only a few weeks, I think, even. And he just focused a dodecahedron on this plant, and it grew out of season. Like it would only ever grow 2 times a year, and he made it grow by focusing one of the platonic solids on it. So, and I've been fascinated by those shapes for a while now, and the power that they have as symbols or just the shape or the geometry. So is there anything, can we put this into practice to connect, to manifest, to grow, to use, to improve ourselves, anything like that, like spiritual practice using this theory?
Yeah, well, it helps to really take in and own that we are the same unified field, and we are connected to everything else in the universe. Yeah. And at the heart and center of all of it is that stillness, that singularity. And so that's why meditation is so effective, because it's actually giving us the embodied experience of going into that center point stillness, where actually the energy potential and creative potential of the whole universe resides. Oh,
that's interesting.
The observable universe is only 4% of what it takes to have the universe. Then you've got dark matter and dark energy, which is the rest. So where is that, all coming from? Is this unified underlying still point state where the potential is even far greater than what's even expressed. And so we do tap into that when we meditate. Another way I have experienced that is, again, another thing that happened to me 40 years ago, right when I came upon Bucky Fuller's work, was also studying Aikido and learning about the Dantian, the 1 point in the belly, and then the extending of ki energy, which is that life force energy. And when you do that, you become massively coherent and stable and strong beyond your physical, muscular limits. It's just incredible. And so how's that happening? Well, you're actually just getting into that center point and becoming coherent in the larger field that is filled with this energy. And when you basically come into resonance or into geometric relationship with that, it gives you that energy, and it's profound. It's so simple to do that, and yet it works incredibly well.
I wonder if primitive man was kind of tied into that all the time. And if that's why like chimps are so strong, like a little chimp will just fuck you up because he's just like got this insane power.
Yeah, like It was one time when
Because
I
he
was
doesn't have all this shit going on
it's
in
the
his head,
attention.
you
Like
know?
I was just thinking that because to do that, you said it was simple, but you must have to practice that attention or the intention, like to be in that spot, unless you're not distracted like a
Because you're a chimp
like a
and you can't be.
you're not worried
No,
about
you're
the future.
absolutely
or the
right.
past.
We're in our heads so much.
Yeah.
Like I do this with people practicing this key energy thing, and so have them stand there, and I'll push on their shoulder, and they're like, whoa, fall backwards, and then I say, okay, now take your mind and drop it down into your 1 point, as they call it, in your dantian. Focus yourself there, and then you just push on them gently but firmly, and boom, boom, they just lock right in. An Aikido master, 5 guys can't even budge him, and he could be hopping up and down, and he's not moving backwards. It's phenomenal, and so it's just how we access that fundamental source. It's available to us, and it is that simple. But it is the matter of shifting from the busy mind, because when we're up in our head, it's easy to be pushed over. Our attention is up here, but when our attention, and if you think of attention as tension, gravitationally cohering yourself, where are you centered? Well, if you're in your head only, it's easy to topple over. Now the thing is that there's that center in the belly. There's another one here. It's called the middle dantian, and there's another one in the middle of the head, the upper dantian. So they're all focal points of this cohering energy. And if you just put your attention there and then radiate like a star from those places, there's an illustration in that section of the book, Consciousness and the Human Experience, where I illustrate those 3 points in radiating light. It's powerful, and it's so simple. All you have to do is do it. And it actually works.
Yeah,
In my experience,
that's fantastic.
it works really well.
Yeah. So
Did you try it yet?
no, I haven't tried. Well, I mean, I've tried similar ones. I've done qigong and some Reiki. Like there's some similar stuff, but I haven't tried. I haven't tried the lighting. The lighting of the star from the.
It's easy. Just do it.
That's right.
You got the book.
Well, if you can't focus, that's pretty hard. I mean, you do have to practice and.
You can't do it on the way to work.
Focus. So I do want to ask a little bit about Thrive and stuff too, but I've also still got to kind of wet my whistle on the platonic solids. Like how do they fit into the whole thing with the double phi? Like I didn't realize that the phi ratio is embedded in the platonic solids, right?
Yeah, it's really remarkable when you see how embedded this whole system is. I call them platonic forms because Bucky Fuller said, we should really, instead of calling them polygons and these triangles and squares and all that, we should call them polyvertexia, meaning the vertices that define these forms are energy events in this tension dynamic. And so if you think of them not as solids, but as constellations of energy events, like at the molecular scale that create crystals and everything, all the form in the universe, organized in these geometries, they're actually resonating, tensegrity, as Bucky would call it, tensegrity arrangements of energy. And so when you have like a tetrahedron there, or the dodecahedron, or these are coherent forms based upon the same energy dynamics that are at play throughout the whole universe. These are the natural constellations energy wants to go into because they're balanced. They're states of equilibrium. Energy always wants to go to equilibrium. And so when you have those and you use them like that, you were saying somebody's using it with a plant or the art crystal, for example, you're bringing that coherent state into this experience and this scale that we live on.
It's like the cymatics or whatever.
It resonates.
What's the same idea as the cymatics or whatever?
Yeah, it's really the same thing, I think.
Yeah, it's so fascinating.
It's resonance.
So you could put your pot plant on your speaker that's playing
instead of shouting
cymatics music all day while you're at work, and it's just loving it. And then you come home and tell it you love it.
Exactly right.
There you go.
And there are frequencies that will enhance that growth. As a matter of fact, the art crystals too. If you get an art crystal and then you use water that's either going through it, or you take a tank of water and charge it with the crystal, then water the plants. I mean, they've done years of experiments with plant growth, and it's 400 times faster than the regular rate from tap water, for example.
Wow.
400 times.
Depending on what city your tap water's from.
At least for germination. I'm not sure about the plant growth, but germination is.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your book, how long were you thinking about writing that, and how long was it quite a process? Is it something you've been thinking of for a long time, and you did it finally? Or because I mean, it's pretty amazing work.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it started 40 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I wondered. Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's the culmination of all that.
And then I was aware of Bucky Fuller's work, and then I did a vision quest up in the Adirondack Mountains when I was 21. And where our cabin is 8 miles from where you leave the car, and I was just way out in the deep wilderness, and in that I saw this double spiral pattern that I talk about in the book. You see it in sunflowers and everything. Right at the peak of this journey, I saw that pattern, and so that became a really guiding talisman and symbol for me, which I write a lot about in the book. And then like I said, about 20 years ago, I met Nassim and Foster, both of whom were working together and developing the application of these ideas into science and physics and atomic structures and all that. And so and then I've been a musician my whole life, so understanding the 12-tone nature of the music system, which relates directly to the vector equilibrium, which relates directly to the physics, and that's the whole point of my book, is they're all one system. It all just became more and more clear to me that there's a simplicity of this nature of the system that I wanted to write about. And I got enough understanding about the physics, about Bucky's geometry, and my understanding of the double phi spiral, and then how that fits in with the platonic forms, how it's all tensegrity based, harmonic, organized, one whole system. And I've been doing presentations, as I think you read there. I'll be a lifetime member of COSM, Chapel of Sacred Mirrors, Alex and Allison Gray's wonderful place in New York State. And I've done presentations there over the years. So I've been honing, what's the story I want to tell? And about 3.5 years ago, I was like, okay, it's time to write. And I, by circumstances, ended up living at my mom's house in Connecticut after my dad died, and was with her for the last 4 years of her life, which, gave me a chance to take a break from I've been a producer, and I've had big projects on my shoulders for 20 years at that point. I was like, oh, I need a break. And I was like, oh, I can write my book now. And I also wrote a bunch of music too. So it just gave me a chance to get it going.
That's awesome.
And so 3.5 years ago, I dove in, and thankfully I feel confident about writing. So it came out mostly like you see it there, and I've been working on it and getting all the illustrations, and worked with an awesome 3D graphics guy who's actually working with us on Thrive 2 right now.
Yeah.
To do the illustrations for the book.
Yeah.
So it all came together quite nicely.
Was it your experience that you wrote about in the book with the butterflies, or was that during the vision quest? Or? It
was.
Can you just explain that quickly before we move on?
Well, I think we can talk freely here on this show.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So I was 21, and I had some psilocybin mushrooms, and first time I ever went up to my family's cabin. I've been going there since 5 years old. And like I said, it's remote. It's in the high peaks wilderness of the Adirondacks. And so I had this quest to go do this journey, and I went up. I actually used the I Ching to divine kind of some things, and then I used a pendulum to figure out where to go. And
nice.
And I was it was up this brook, and I went up to the highest point on this brook I'd ever been to. It's right in the cradle of these mountains that look like 3 pyramids and everything. It's just incredible. And it's about 8 a.m, and I took the mushrooms, I put them up in the sun on a rock to kind of just let them cleanse in the sunlight, and then took off all my clothes and got in this icy cold water from the brook. Most pure water. You can drink it right straight from the brook. It's so pure. It's the most incredible water. And I stood on, stood on the rocks in the morning sunlight to just dry off. And a butterfly came in and landed on the rock near me. Like, oh, cool. And then another one came in and landed and walking around. Then another one and a couple more. And they just kept coming in. And then I'm watching them. And then they start getting on my feet. And there's 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And then a few more fly in. And I stood there for half an hour. And ultimately 20 butterflies got on my legs. And there was like another 20 on the rock around me. And I was just like, oh, I don't know what the hell just happened, but I'm so in like this bliss. I was like, I don't even know if I should take those mushrooms. You know? It might bring me down. And so it was absolutely remarkable. And I do write about it in the book because ever since then, I've thought, you know, how do these butterflies communicate? You know, dude, there's a guy on the rocks with water on his legs and on it, we could go drink it or whatever they were doing. I'm not sure what their motivation was. That certainly must have been part of it. But, you know, here they are in the woods. I couldn't see them until they all showed up, but somehow they communicated with each other. Not only like, I'm here, but he's over there. He's at this location. Come on over. It's just remarkable. And yeah, so that blew my mind. And then I did ultimately take the journey. And at the peak of that, like I said, I went into a meditation and I saw this double spiral pattern. And that became, I mean, it's on the cover of my book and sunflower and everything. And it's really quite profound when I've come to understand how that pattern is manifesting and what the nature of the phi ratio is, what role is it playing, which I actually learned from the work of Richard Merrick. And he, you know, he basically looked at it from the interference patterns of sound and music perspective and saw that there's resonance where you can get the harmonics and the notes, and then there's gaps where it's silent. And those gaps are defined by the phi ratio and the Fibonacci sequence. And so it's actually playing a role of taking the non-whole number frequencies and spinning them down back to the 0 point through these Fibonacci vortices. And it's just like, whoa, that's it. And then you could see it in all the spirals and all the definition of form where there's space and, you know, form and formlessness. That's what's creating all, you know, form is a resonance and the space in between or around is the stillness. And it's like, wow, so awesome.
Very awesome.
And then you see it in the Platonic forms. They're all defined by those ratios and they embed in those ratios with each other.
And in ancient structures. I mean, and they were building to this stuff and, you know, thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
They knew.
They knew. Yeah. Something else happened on this planet than we were told.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So how's Thrive 2 coming then? And how was your experience like now looking back on Thrive? Because that was a pretty important movie. I think that played a pretty big part in the shift of a lot of people. And I mean, I think that was the goal of the movie. But I mean, it really, like, I was glad that you guys broached some of those subjects that you could have probably left off the table, you know?
Well, you know, I have to totally credit Foster Gamble and Kimberly for that. I mean, Foster and Thrive 1 really just, he's one of the most amazing researchers. He's so deep and rigorous on researching, and he's got binders and shelves of binders, you know, and so he put this whole picture together and just like, I got to tell this story. And, you know, with Kimberly's incredible eye towards doing so from a place that was just purely compassionate without an attitude or without, you know, overlaying something on it. And it came through beautifully for that reason. And yeah, it was a very impactful film, and it's over 86 million documented views now.
Wow.
The largest, most widely seen independent documentary in history.
Wow, that's great.
It's huge. And so, yeah, and so Thrive, you know, well, basically we're doing Thrive 2 because after Thrive 1 came out, Foster and Kimberly were contacted by people all over the world. Like, I've got this free energy, I've got this healing, I've got this environmental restoration, all these, you know, things. And there's like 1,000 of them. And they got some people to help do some vetting. And okay, many of them were just concepts. Some where they thought they had something, but they really didn't. But there were those that actually were real and are real. And there's like so much cool stuff. It's all based on accessing the field through harmonics and frequencies and resonance and, quantum interaction. And whether it's in energy or healing or environmental restoration or all the different gravitational, control. And they, at a certain point, said, we need to share this. We need to share that the unified field is real, and that the interaction with this field and these effects, and therefore these technologies that people are developing, are real, and they're here. And they're not just coming, they're here. And with humanity's embracing of the reality of there being a unified field, our understanding of it scientifically, and then the application of it through developing technologies, that it's what's needed to make the shift. We can't make the shift we're in without grounding it in a very practical way. And as Bucky Fuller would say, you obsolete the old systems. You don't try to change them, you obsolete them. And so it's a process of doing that compassionately to obsolete the old that's going to need to collapse. It's going to collapse anyway.
Yeah.
But create those things that make it possible to have a place to evolve into. And that's what's happening. And so Thrive 2 is, going to help to tell that story and make it so people can understand that it's real.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. When's that coming out again?
Sometime next year. I don't know. We're in the thick of it right now.
Yeah. And, so like 2020 kind of thing. Yeah.
2020. Yeah. We are working hard for
2020. Is it tricky keeping that to the point where it doesn't attract too much attention from people that might want to squash that kind of information? I mean, I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but I mean, we've all heard about the free energy suppression over the years.
Yeah. Well, there's an important safety factor, because it's very true and real that people have been killed or threatened or undermined and
bought out,
all the ways that's happened. And it is still happening. So there's a balance of what like I can share that conceptually with you guys. But I'm not going to go into the specifics until the film comes out.
Totally.
And it's changing though very rapidly. Like, it is still happening, but there's also such a growing momentum that some of what was considered a lot more dangerous, let's say even like the legalization of cannabis, or even here in Denver and in Oakland, they passed the decriminalization of plant-based psychoactive medicine. And so these things are no longer being able to be suppressed and controlled. And that's happening, and it's going to happen. And so for our part, we want to inform people and inspire people, and inspire a very kind of optimistic and innovative perspective on the fact that this stuff is real, and it's not far off in the future. It's here now. And to make the transition from where we're at into these things has to be done with a conscious, compassionate approach that can provide safety and security and appropriate transition as much as possible. And at the same time, we're in a very critical transition period where we don't have a lot of time, given the instabilities in
to try and do that without polarizing things even more would be tricky as well. To keep it, to try and keep it very compassionate to everybody and not picking sides, maybe, or that kind of thing. I mean, there's also the new interest in, there's also the interest in consciousness and the occult and magic, and UFOs are now kind of more mainstream. They're accepting a lot of people now that that it's been in the news, and they're not completely ridiculing it anymore. People are open to a lot of these different things now. So maybe the timing's right.
It's definitely surging fast these days. And it needs to. And as far as I'm concerned, it's an inevitable process. If we don't blow the show beforehand, it's an inevitable process that is natural. It's a natural emergent process in a species like ours who's evolving with these capacities now. our consciousness has to evolve with it, and it is. So.
Right on. Yeah. That's probably a good
Bingo,
spot
bango.
to end, eh? We don't want to keep you too long. Darren, do you have anything else, or what do you
No,
want?
I think that's pretty good. Yeah, my mind's thoroughly fucked for the rest of the night. I think I'll leave it there.
Take the night off then.
Do you have anything else you want to add before we let you go?
Well, check out my book. You can go to cosmometry.com and learn about it. Go to Amazon. As of today, it just got released on Amazon in the Kindle
That's
and
great.
print versions.
Now we can get a print copy.
Yeah, we're gonna get one for the studio for sure.
copy.
It's gonna be like a
I heard
reference.
it's not on
reference
Amazon
copy.
Canada quite yet, but I think it takes like a day or two to reach up north
Motherfucker.
there.
We probably won't get Thrive 2 up here either. So
Yeah.
We'll VPN it. We'll VPN it.
VPN it.
Well, if we can't find a reason before then, we'll have to have you back on the show when Thrive comes out.
yeah.
I'd love to do that. Yeah, anytime.
Yeah,
Anytime.
100%.
It's a real joy. I love your guys' ways of thinking and how you kind of both play off of different ways of looking at the same thing, and great questions. And you guys obviously know a lot about what's happening.
Awesome. Well, we try.
We try.
We're
Yeah.
just
We
we're
cheat.
just a couple
We just talk
dumb
to smart
Canadians.
people like you a couple times a week, and then it just sort of percolates.
Yeah, well, it's something by osmosis.
That's something. Yeah,
It's in the ether.
it's like
Sure.
it's like hanging out in a rich neighborhood, so you can you like I forget
Yeah.
what that. If you hang out in a rich neighborhood,
Get
you
the
end up
vibe.
rich. Yeah, exactly. So we just hang out with smart people.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing this whole time.
Yeah.
Well, I spent my 20s hanging out in bars, so that didn't go so well for me.
I hear you.
So we'll link to all that stuff in the show notes as well. And yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. And then I don't know if you guys know about our delegate retreat in the Redwoods here in Santa Cruz in July. If you go to resonanceScience.org and look up that, we're going to have Foster and Kimberly Gamble there, Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden. They're going to
Nice.
come in through Zoom.
Oh, that's great.
All of the scientists from Resonance Science Foundation are going to be there. They're going to be like mini TED Talk style resonance talks, and awesome musicians like Elijah Ray is going to be there.
Well, if you guys need an official podcast to go around with you guys and podcast these things out, we could interview everyone who's there. We could be like your little media section.
Right on. Cool.
And you just need some art crystals.
So where do we get the link from that? That's in the Resonance Foundation?
ResonanceScience.org.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Put that in there too. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, we hope you have fun in the Redwoods.
Thanks.
And come back anytime, Marshall.
Awesome. I
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
it, guys.
That was great. Thanks a lot.
All right. I enjoyed it very much. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And that was our chat with Marshall Lefferts. What'd you think, buddy?
Ooh, well, let's chalk that to one of my absolute favorites.
That was a pretty good one,
For
eh?
sure, yeah.
Got some
It's
growing
just,
earth in there.
When you get that new, like it's like a step up and kind of understanding or what you
Oh,
think.
you stepped up? You leveled up?
Leveled up. Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly. I leveled up in the platonic solid. Yeah.
In your understanding of
the
unified
field. It helped, like reading the book was great, but it helped him actually just explaining it in his own words. And
I don't really understand unified field theory. I don't know.
well, I don't think it's called that. It's the unified physics model, I think. Is what
Oh,
he
is
said.
it?
That's what Nassim's was, but his is called. Unified field theory is the old name for. His is called, he says, exploring the holofractal nature of the cosmos, a unified model of cosmic geometry, physics, music, and consciousness.
Ah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's a unified
I always think
model.
I don't understand it, but then it seems to make more sense to me than I think.
Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty smart sometimes. So.
Sometimes, eh?
Yeah. What'd you think? It was good?
That was pretty
Yeah.
good. I think that's what's responsible for pair production. I'd like to talk to Neil Adams again now. Maybe not Neil Adams, though. Maybe we could find someone else down that...
Why?
I don't know. We could talk to
I don't
Neil
know if
Adams
there's
too.
anybody else that's really a proponent of the growing earth theory.
I think there's a few.
Really?
Yeah, I thought there was a few. I thought Neil was just really rehashing and doing a good visual presentation of someone else's work. But maybe someone out in the audience can let us know about that. Let us know if you know a growing earth person. I did tweet Neil Adams again, and he didn't respond. But I'll try again.
Mm-hmm.
Because it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to go down that rabbit hole now that we've gone down.
I can't wait to get this book in the studio and just peruse it constantly.
Well, you shouldn't have moved to Canada. I guess you were
Well,
born
we got
here.
lots of people we got lots of friends out in the States. We can get it.
They can buy it and ship it to us with some cash in the pages, because that's how we keep this show going, with your support, with no ads, no sponsors, no corporate overlords, no commercials, just you guys. And if you don't support the show won't exist, and that'll be it. There'll be no more Gramerica. Remember that podcast we used to listen to, Gramerica, that's gone because we didn't support it? Because support the show, because you don't want that to happen. Gramerica.ca/support, as little as $1 a month. I mean, obviously, we prefer you sign up for $25 a month. That's what we put the value at. Well, $5 seems to be the most common. That's about $1 a show. But we'll settle for $1 a month, because 99% of you don't bother to do that. So if we could get 50% of you, that's half of you. So that means don't assume someone else is going to do it. You just go do it.
2%.
If I shoot for 50, we might get one.
Okay.
So we're going to get 50% of you this week. We'll do odd days.
Okay.
So if your birthday's on an odd day, you got to sign up today. America.ca/support. We love you. Do all the other stuff in the show notes too. Review the show.
Email Graham.
Share the show. Spam Graham@America.com. Sign people up for the newsletter. Be kind to each other. Have some good vibes for the weekend. Support the show.
You went to stillness.
Namaste. All right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. Poo-poo. Now we got
awesome. Thanks to everybody.
Yeah, thanks to everyone for tuning in live. Seems like the live people like that as well. Seems like it'll be a good one.
That was he was awesome.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite guests.
How long do you need to get ready for the intro?
Such a good natured dude, you know? He just seemed like a solid dude.
How long you need for the intro?
Till tomorrow.
That's not an option.
No.
10 minutes?
No, not even. Let's just get her done.
Okay, we'll be back in 5.